Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the episode finale of Pop Culture Problems. I'm Josh Nichols, and I'm here with John Oderman, and yes, it is the end of Pop Culture Problems for this episode, because our seasons run one episode at a time. And so
our seasons run, because this is the end of the season at the beginning of the episode?
Well, I mean, this episode is the first and last of the season.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's clear.
follow along.
Yes.
It's like we do no prep work, kind of educating each other what we're going to talk about. But, series finales are always an interesting topic. You got the good ones, you got the bad ones, you got the ones that are controversial and people think are good or bad. And it's always a bittersweet thing when one of your favorite TV shows end. And I think one of the things I want to talk about is not only your favorites and your least favorites, but do you have an opinion on if a show should end before its shelf life is over, or should it just keep plowing through?
I think it depends on the show. I mean, for example, there's a lot of sitcoms that I think could seemingly run forever and ever and ever. But there's a lot of other shows there where they have like a finite story, and I think they should end because they kind of wrap up the story, and there's really no loose ends left to tell or to expand upon. And I guess it really depends on the show. I thought like the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer had a really awesome 7-season run where they kind of wrapped everything up with that last episode, but also kind of left it open for the future where there is a story like these characters would go on. You're not going to find out. Well, and since then they have gone on in different formats and stuff like that. But I think finite series like that, like Breaking Bad, things like that, where they're trying to tell a story, it's important for them to end in their own time.
Yeah, I get in this kind of zone where I like a show and I don't want it to end, and so I almost get mad when it's over. I'm like, really? Why did they had so much more to give? Mm-hmm. And it's with shows that run a long time. I mentioned before I like the show Will and Grace, like Jack and Karen, and they ran. I mean, some people would say longer than they should have because the episodes were similar. It was formulaic, and you keep going with it. Same thing with like Big Bang Theory. People complain that it's kind of the same thing over and over, but I like the joke and I like the humor that they're going for. Mm-hmm. And so, sure, bring on another 30 seasons. I don't care. I'm not looking for that story that you're talking about. But with like series or dramas, the non-sitcom ones, it's almost more important that they not get to the point where they have to jump the shark.
Yeah, and like a TV show like Cheers.
Yeah.
I think I've watched that entire series like 2 or 3 times. I would watch another 10 to 15 20 years of new episodes of Cheers. Like they could have kept that on the air, and I think maybe it would have dipped in viewership here and there, but I think it would have had consistent fan base just because those characters were so like beloved, and they fit like the archetypes that make a good sitcom.
So here's something. I'm considering the fact that on a lot of shows I like a couple characters or the minor subset of characters better than the real ones. Jack and Karen on Will and Grace, I care less about Will and Grace. On a show like Cheers, they had a pretty good cast, but my favorite characters were like Norm, Cliff, Rhea Perlman, what was her?
Carla.
Yeah. And those were my favorite. And I almost wish they would have had a spinoff with just like those characters, because you got caught up in a lot of the romance of Sam and his different ladies, mm-hmm. and some of that felt like it just took away from some of the comedy bits. Like I almost wish they would have a show where the minor characters are major and the major characters are minor, and I know that sounds weird.
And that's the thing about like really good sitcoms is you've got those characters that it's kind of built around. But what really makes a good sitcom is those secondary and tertiary characters that are kind of like right on the periphery, but can sneak in, and you can have like a Norm-centric episode, like a Frasier-centric episode.
Yeah,
and that's the first couple seasons of Cheers were Sam and Diane, and then I think they really realized that we've got some great characters here on the periphery that we really need to utilize, and some great actors like George Wendt as Norm.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he's phenomenal. Cliff Clavin's another great character. Every single one of those periphery characters, and there's some ones that come in later on in the later seasons, and I think that's really the determining factor of what a good sitcom is what kind of secondary and tertiary characters you could. I mean, another great example of this is Seinfeld, where you have the Costanzas, you have Uncle Leo, you have Newman, you have all these different characters that are peppered throughout and it's an ebb and flow throughout the series that they come in and out of these characters' lives, and it just enriches like the whole storytelling process where you have these recurring characters that can add to the story.
But see, for me, those are the show, especially with sitcoms.
Absolutely.
Like, and I there's actually shows that they were okay shows, but I sort of detest them in a way. Friends is a perfect example. Like, I wasn't forced to watch Friends, but it was not something I watched when it was on, and then I watch it later, and it was a good show. It was okay. But I hated Ross and Rachel, and that's what the show became, was this Ross and Rachel, Ross and Rachel, and even though there was the characters were almost on an even playing field, it kind of naturally had this progression of only focusing on the two characters.
Yeah, the will they or won't theys. And I think that's when a sitcom gets bad. Is when you get stuck in those storylines. And David Schwimmer will always be Ross. I don't think he'll ever escape that. And
no, David Schwimmer played David Schwimmer. He played a person that I don't like.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he's a good actor.
Friends is a show that I can appreciate, but I have like a kind of like it's stuck in my craw that people try to compare it to Seinfeld and say like it's comparable, or even like there's some people that say that Friends was a better show than Seinfeld. If you think it's debatable, we can't be friends.
I mean, yeah, period. I mean, John will not be your friend. I've actually changed my worldview on many things just to continue this podcast.
And this friendship.
That is friendship.
Yeah.
To compromise your morals and values at the appeasement of the other person. That's what friendship's about. I
appreciate that definition of friendship.
So let's get back on track now to finales specifically. So what is your... And you can give multiple, but I mean, what would you put... We're making a spectrum. What would you say is one of your worst finales versus one of your best finales? Just so we get a baseline. Because then if I mention a show, you can say, oh, that's closer to my favorite or my worst.
Well, I think a lot of people... And the funny thing is I actually read some analysis of this that put it in a different light for me now. But I think in my recollection, one of, if not the worst finales of any series ever was Roseanne.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we've alluded to that in the past, but I actually read a really interesting analysis of the final season of Roseanne, where it was like Roseanne Barr kind of took over as like a director of a lot of episodes and main writer on the show, and she just kind of kept raising the bar and making it more and more ridiculous as she went, just to kind of stick it to ABC.
Okay.
And but that still does not explain why she like ruined the show that was so great.
Oh yeah,
and that was like a season of like,
this is a show topic all of its own, but this will be a precursor. What is it about people that have, they've created a legacy? Roseanne Barr is a funny woman.
Absolutely.
And she's a talented, creative woman. So if that's the reason and rationale, why would you burn your legacy? Why would you take your legacy, pour gasoline on it, and strike the match? Like, don't you have any pride in your work? Why not end it? And there's so many stars that have left their shows because of a contract dispute and things like that, and I feel like they're tarnishing their own legacy.
Well, the thing about Roseanne is that show was so popular, and she did everything she could to like tarnish the legacy of that show, and yet people loved it so much that they're bringing it back.
Are they really?
Yeah, they're bringing it back.
Yeah, I see it to believe it. There's some shows. I mean, here's the thing. This is like Austin Powers 4 or Duke Nukem. Like, I mean, it's one of those like.
I'll believe it when I see it.
I'll believe it when I see it, because there's so many things that have to fall into alignment. And for me with Roseanne, I agree. I put that up there with one of the worst of my memory, and I have not seen all shows, but the fact that, number one, the last season just was jumping one shark and then two and then three flaming sharks and then sharks eating kittens, and they were just jumping all kinds of animals.
Yes.
And then they took with a 1 minute monologue of Roseanne, they took away every good part of the show because they ruined everything about it. They said everything you know is wrong, up is down, right is wrong, and this is it just took everything and flipped it upside down, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
It wasn't a twist ending.
No.
It was remember how you liked this character? Actually, everything about them was opposite, and the person you liked here, they were dead, and I just made this one up, and I'm like, what?
It just out of left field. Just it was almost like she sat down at the writers' table and said, "Okay, how can we make this person the exact opposite of what people like?"
And it's sad because again, when you have fond memories of a show up until a certain point, and then they do something like that, it just kind of sticks in my craw. Now,
what about for you though? I mean, in
worst?
terms of worst.
Roseanne. I don't know.
This is why we're friends.
Because I don't know how to describe any other worst show besides that. And I know that there's been other shows, and I know there's been other finales that I've thought were bad or something like that. But that one always just sticks with me because it was just so phenomenally bad. Okay, so as far as best... actually, I'm going to go back to worst for a second. Dexter.
Okay.
I put that up there with one of the worst, but it wasn't like it ruined the whole show. But after the fourth season, there was a director for the first 4 seasons, I believe, and he was phenomenal.
He was like a showrunner, yeah.
Yeah, okay. and then he left, and the other directors, it seems like it didn't go downhill where it like flatlined, but it was just kind of, it was there. And you were waiting for that puncher kick at the end. And spoiler alert, we've had that episode already. Don't go into it thinking you're going to be satisfied because Dexter becomes a lumberjack.
Did we set that at 5 years? Was that
I think it's been 5 years.
I think that was the rule that you set. Was
something
the
like
5
that.
years, yeah.
Dexter becomes a lumberjack. What? He is a serial killer, and he goes on his boat and he's traveling into the eye of the storm, and you think he died, and then the last 3 seconds he's a lumberjack in the middle of the woods.
He needs to cut stuff, man.
What?
He needs to cut stuff.
He needs to cut stuff. You know what he needs to cut? The last 30 seconds of that season. Because and that's one of the things for me. It's interesting how a split second, we talked about, not to spoil anything, but the after the credit footage or the DVD footage of the last 30 seconds of Split, almost made the entire movie better.
Worth it, yeah.
And it just kind of like added this little oomph and pizzazz to it. And so I think that, if you have a show that you can ruin in that short of time, it's just... think it through a little bit more. And I read an article with the Dexter frontrunner or showrunner, that one guy. He said how he would have ended the show. And the way he said it, like, it was just like a dream to me. It was like the most perfect ending.
It always breaks your heart when you always hear what the person that like you wanted to finish it would have done.
Oh yeah, and he described it so articulately, and it took in elements from the other show, and it just had all these things that would make you tingly, and it just didn't happen. And so it makes me woulda, shoulda, coulda about what could have been, and it makes me sad that it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So that was a bad one, but Roseanne was way worse because at least Dexter's 8 seasons were pretty sound altogether. Yeah. The last season of Roseanne didn't even hold a candle. So what's your best?
Well, I got to start that last one. What about you? What's your best?
My best, I would say one of the best, and not necessarily my favorite TV show, but one of the best finales I've ever seen, coincidentally, also stars Michael C. Hall of Dexter fame, 6 Feet Under.
Okay.
6 Feet Under, for those who've never seen it, it's about this family who runs a funeral home and, kind of their obstacles they face while doing this and in their community. And it's a decent show. I enjoyed it. but it wasn't remarkable. The last episode, though, was remarkable. They basically, because the show surrounds about death and the funeral home and you know how life is finite, and they show how every character, every major character in the show dies. So they will skip forward a month, 6 years, 30 years, and they will show you the moment of their death in 60 seconds for every single character. And so it really does end every single character. There's no loose ends because death is final. And boy, it was just that last, I would say 10 to 15 minutes where they were recapping all the deaths was just so spectacular. And you were like, are they really doing this? Like once it clicks that you realize what's happening, you're excited because you're like, okay, how does this guy die? How does this guy die? Where does this girl go? And so, oh boy, it's interesting. And also they weren't over the top with how individuals died. Like, and I can't remember all of them, but so I'm just going to speak generically. But like, I think one has a heart attack, and if you would have pegged him, you thought he would have died of something else because of his lifestyle. Oh, whoopsie, it was just some kind of freak accident. And so it kind of also turns that on its head of what your expectations of the characters are and how you feel they're going to end up. And whoop, no, just 100% opposite.
Now, to you though, like what makes a good final episode?
A good final episode makes me, one, want more, but two, makes me happy that it's not Roseanne. I know that sounds weird, but when I leave a show, I want a good feeling in my tummy. I want, a warm glow in my lower intestine. And I had the similar thing with Will and Grace. I loved that show, and I thought it was a good comedy. And I think they wrapped everything up really well, and they put a nice little bow on it. And even though I wanted more episodes because it was a good ending, I thought, wow, they went on a great note, and I wish there was one more or two more or three more. I felt good. I felt as though, they had a great run. I kind of put myself in the shoes of the cast, like how bittersweet for them to end this family they have. But it shows you that a show like that did so well can come back. And I think it's because they ended so well. That's why I'm skeptical about Roseanne. Because I think people have a bitter taste in their mouth about the last season and possibly how everything went down. Whereas, like, Full House is an example. It's debatable whether or not Fuller House is good or even Full House was good, but Full House was beloved by millions.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And so I think...
TGIF, man.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's why it was a candidate for coming back, because people had fond memories. I don't remember the last episode of that.
Neither do I. Very forgettable. I don't think I ever saw it.
I don't even know if I've seen it, but it wasn't bad, apparently, because people were, whatever. It ended and it was okay. I think that if a sitcom can have, or a series can have a twist or something that's unique, I think that's also fun. We've talked about old shows like Michael Landon, but Little House on the Prairie was an interesting example. Like in the show, they blow up the town. And so they kind of like end it in this kind of weird way. And it was not jumping the shark, so to speak. It was kind of just putting this button on it the way that mostly today in a TV show, they kill off the main character. And that was the way that they would have everybody living, but they were able to say, it's over. We're not gonna do it anymore.
And for me, I there's a lot of people that want like this big spectacular end, or they just want it to kind of fade off and ride off into the sunset or whatever. To me, like I think people almost put too much into a finale. Like they put too much like weight on it. Like for example, like the Seinfeld finale. I remember when that first aired, people were just like they could not wait to see like the Seinfeld finale. I mean, that was like one of the highest rated shows on television for years and years and years, and characters were loved by millions and millions of people, and people were like disappointed about the finale. And now, if you watch it like in a vacuum, that's actually a pretty solid episode of Seinfeld. It's not a bad episode of Seinfeld. Plus, you've got like the cool rotating chair of all these like side characters throughout the years that you loved, and like the soup Nazi shows up. All these different characters, and to me, like I look at it now and I'm like, you know what? That wasn't a bad finale, and you kind of almost have to look at them in a way that it's away from the hype leading up to the series finale of a show, and really kind of judge it on its own. And I think collectively, the Seinfeld finale plays well to the show. I'm not saying that's my favorite of all time. My favorite of all time would likely either be the Cheers finale, or I don't know if you've ever watched the show, but Angel. It was a spinoff from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yeah. David Boreanaz as Angel, who was like this vampire that had a soul, and the thing about Angel was that they didn't really know if like the 5th season would be the final season. It ended up being the final season, and they knew that the show wasn't going to go on, but the series finale ends on kind of a cliffhanger where like hell comes to earth, and like the main characters, like the final scene is like them going in to like defend Earth, and it's basically like an impossible battle, and the whole build up to that in that 5th season to that final scene, like you get like goosebumps because it's like you care about the characters, you're invested in things like that, and that's really I think what you're looking for in a series finale of a show is for it to be true to the characters and to be defining of the characters, and that's why I like the Cheers finale so much. Is Diane shows up, spoiler alert, and her and
I think it's the statute of limitations,
and it looks like her and Sam are gonna leave and go to L.A. and Sam realizes the bar is more important to me than any woman has ever been, and then he goes back to the bar, and that's the thing that is so powerful about that, because Sam in the show spends years and years trying to get the bar back, and he finally gets the bar back in those final couple seasons, and then Diane comes back, who was his love interest the first couple seasons. It was always Sam and Diane. I mean, Sam and Diane are referenced in like pop culture everywhere. Like that's permeated the culture. It's in music. It's in movies. It's in TV shows.
But Sam and Diane, at least, they had a shelf life, and they ended it before it became the Ross phenomenon of like, won't they?
Yeah.
They gave enough of a life cycle to it, but they also knew when to end it. You could only play that song so many times.
And so like that was what, and the really cool thing about the end of that show is, like, you can picture walking into Cheers today and having those same characters there.
Oh, yeah.
Except for Frasier, because he moved to Seattle.
Well, and I haven't seen Frasier. That's on my list now to watch Frasier, because it's, that spinoff. But actually, with Cheers, I really like the finale because of one special Easter egg cameo. And I'm not sure if you...
I want to know what you're thinking of here.
It's the Coach nod.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. with the photo.
Yes,
because they had the photo that they put on the set in remembrance of the actor. And at the very end, it's kind of crooked on the wall, and Sam goes over and kind of straightens it and takes a look at it. And I thought those are touches that if you're just watching as someone who
as a passerby,
passerby, you're like, okay, he straightened it. He cares about the bar. He has his attention to detail. But for the longtime fans, you're like, oh wow,
yeah, there's that.
And it kind of brings back those emotions. So I think that's a real big thing. But I kind of want to go back for a second, because you were talking about Seinfeld, and I hated the Seinfeld finale. Period. Hated, right. Throw up all over the room. And here's the reason, and I can define why. Because I only saw like 5 episodes of Seinfeld, passerby, and I heard such good things about the show, but I really wasn't a fan. But it was like everybody and their brother and their dog had to watch the finale because it was such a momentous occasion. And I remember watching it thinking, well, that was lackluster. It's kind of a show about nothing. Like, I literally described what people loved about it. And so after going back and watching a few seasons, and I have not finished the show, I think if I go back and watch the finale now, I'll be fine with it.
Yeah.
But I had put those expectations up because people said, this is such a good show. And that was similar, I think, with, a show ending past its shelf life, kind of thing. Seinfeld, they didn't have a shelf life. They ended when they wanted to because there wasn't anything there wasn't overarching stories or any arcs that were really having a necessity to be tied up because each show was so self-contained. Whereas like I think for me, bittersweet finale or final seasons, The Office.
Oh yes, the scene in The Office that's a great final episode. But when Andy Bernard at the end of that episode talks about how when you're in the good old days, you wish that somebody would tell you you were in the good old days so you could appreciate it. Every time I see that scene, tear up, get goosebumps because I watched that show from the beginning, and at first, like it was the show that the little engine that could. 6 episodes of the first season, didn't know if it was going to get canceled or not. All of a sudden, became the most watched show on television.
Well, and I liked the first seasons of the show were great, and I loved Michael Scott. And when Michael left, I thought, end the show, cut it off.
But then they introduced Robert California.
Well, and here's the thing. I thought, and how many seasons they run after? Like 2 or 3?
2 or 3. I think it was 3.
Let's just say 3 as an example, just for my comparison here. I think that the last or the 2.5 seasons before the last half of the final season were okay. There was Robert California, Kathy Bates coming in. There were some good elements, but
writer's strike.
Yeah,
that's what happened.
It was lacking. It was missing, and I hated. And Andy Bernard
as the
was
boss.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
He was the worst, and it was like the worst possible choice to have. But all of a sudden, the last half of the last season felt like
The Office again.
Yeah, it felt like what the last 3 seasons should have been total.
Yep.
I liked the whole turning the cameras and seeing behind what's been happening and releasing the footage and Michael Scott showing up at the wedding was like
with gray hair and
it was unbelievable. So that one was one I kind of felt for 2.5 seasons after Michael Scott left. Why did they keep going? It was a chore for me to continue watching it, and then that last half of the season kind of paid it off for me.
See, and the thing is like these shows that we're talking about right now, I feel like we could do a podcast like on each of them. I feel like you could talk about Cheers for an entire podcast. Seinfeld, The Office, you might have to do like a 2 or 3 parter because I just love that show so much.
Oh, I've got an idea. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do a spin-off of Pop Culture Problems, and we'll think of a name, but it'll be more niche stuff because a lot of people, if they've never seen a certain show, they might not want to listen to 3 hours of it. But we can talk about it for 3 hours, and if there are 3 people out there, they'll listen to it.
If we get 3 listeners, I'll be happy. That's how I feel every week when we put these online.
There is an example of a show that I think could have gone a little bit longer, and then kind of did. So All in the Family, we've talked about that before, and that was a show that I think it's had the most spin-offs of like any other show, like Maude and Good Times and 704 Hauser Street and it's tons of spinoffs. But Archie Bunker's Place was the next one, and everything kind of stayed the same. Like they basically got rid of Meathead and Little Goyle, but they kept Archie and Edith and everything. And then I think at the last, it was the last couple of episodes of the first season or the first couple episodes of the second season of that show, they killed off Edith, and I think that would have been such a powerful finale, or even have that be third to the last episode or something like that, and then have how he's dealing with it. So I kind of felt like it's too bad that wasn't the finale. Yeah. Even though Edith was endearing and you loved her, it was such a powerful thing that the fact that story didn't get told, and most people have never seen it because I think only the first season is on DVD. So some people may not even know that had happened.
Now, are there any shows that are on currently that you love so much, but you kind of want to see how it ends? Like you're like looking forward to the series finale?
I like the journey so much that sometimes the payoff, I don't even think that far. Because I get very attached to shows where I want them to keep going, and I think for me one of the issues is in our culture of binge watching, where now I go into a show after it's ended. I know there's 3 seasons. That's all I got. And so it's like I start counting down, and it's almost emotional where I'm like, there's only 197 episodes left. 196, 95, 94. And I just get so invested. I don't know that there's any show that I'm really waiting for the payoff because I do so much binge watching. Okay. Like something like Orange is the New Black or something like that. I'm kind of curious where they're going to go, how far they're going to take it, and then where it's going to land, because each season's so different. But I mean, it's still got so much life left into it. So
see, for me, the one show that I really want to see how it ends, just because I'm invested because I've read the books and stuff, Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah,
there's 12 episodes left, seven episodes this season, 6 next season, and I kind of wish that I would have been able to read the books first. But George R.R. Martin is going to die and not finish them, so I'm going to have to rely on the show to tell the end of the story.
I mean, cut him a break. Hey, he is human after all.
Yeah, absolutely. But I finish the book.
Just for John.
But that's a show that I can't wait to get to the end to see how it all wraps up and see who wins and who sits on the Iron Throne. I actually think that there might not be an Iron Throne at the end of it. I think it might be
it was all a hoax.
A little different. So
the Iron Throne will pull off its mask.
There's some really bizarre theories about how it's going to end, and I actually think Daenerys is somehow going to like melt the Iron Throne or something like that, and she's going to develop some kind of council or something like that. Where
no, I know how it's going to end. All of a sudden, you're going to see a shadowy figure sitting on the throne,
it's going to be Larry David.
It's going to be fog, and it's going to be the camera pulling in slowly and tighter and tighter. And before you can make out the face, you're going to hear the Roseanne cackle. And Roseanne Barr will appear. And she will ruin yet another season finale. Well, John, we've reached the end of the show. And here's the thing. One show that I hope never ends is this one. We got to keep this going forever.
I'm just glad that this series is over. Because, I mean, it's been a long one.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next season, next episode, right here on Pop Culture Problems.